Good evening. The San Dimas City Council and Planning Commission study session today, pursuant to the Governor's executive order dated March 17th, the City Council is authorized to hold public meetings via teleconferencing and to make meetings accessible electronically to all members of the public seeking to observe and to address this legislative body. All Brown Act provisions that require the physical presence of city council members or the public for city council meetings are waived. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The city clerk will read the roll for both the City Council and the Planning Commission, please.
Here.
Councilmember Ebner.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Viana.
Here.
Councilmember Weber.
Here.
Chair Brad. Commissioner Brad. Commissioner Green.
Margie.
Okay, got it. Yes, here.
Commissioner Brad.
He's joining right now. He had a computer problem.
Commissioner Molina.
Here.
And Commissioner Davis.
I'm here.
And Commissioner Bratt, once he gets on, can somebody let me know, indicate that he's there?
Okay, I'll let you know.
I also see Commissioner Ross.
Oh,
Here.
Commissioner Ross.
Here.
And I also think the mayor's here.
Sounds like him.
And Mayor Badar.
Thank you. Okay. Call to order. For anyone wishing to address the City Council on this item on the agenda, under the provisions of the Brown Act, the legislative body is prohibited from taking or engaging in discussion on any item not appearing on this posted agenda. So do we have any oral communications? 2? Okay.
Thank you for calling. Please state your name and your 3 minutes starts now.
Hi, good evening. Gary Ender. I'd just like to, first of all, wish a happy Thanksgiving. With that said, on Tuesday, October 13th of this year, a joint study session with the City Council and the Planning Commission was scheduled to discuss the grading guidelines for SP 11. If I remember correctly, all 5 of the City Council members and the 5 members of the Planning Commission were present, as well as the individuals that wanted to speak on this subject. At the start of the meeting, Mayor Badar announced that they were going to go ahead and reschedule the meeting for a later date, sometime after COVID-19 was over. The reason given was so that people could plan on being at the council chambers for the discussion. I guess the question I'm asking the mayor is why you are going forward with this joint study session and wouldn't allow the SP 11 meeting. What are the guidelines you are determining? Who goes forward and who has to wait until after COVID-19?
Does that conclude the speaker's comments? If there's no further comments, we can move on to the next speaker.
Can that be addressed?
No, the council's not allowed to get into discussion about items that are not on the agenda tonight. So if the council wanted to, they could request a future agenda item.
Okay, if we could do that, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for calling. Please state your name and your 3 minutes starts now.
Good evening. This is Isabel Ebner. I'm a radar council member, planning commission. I'm sure this is already on your radar, but as I was reviewing the agenda for this study session tonight, I noticed that in August 2019, the City Council decided not to move forward with a storage facility proposal for this site that's being considered tonight for rezoning due to concerns with the loss of affordable housing. I'm sure that tonight you will be considering all of that and evaluating if rezoning for industrial is ideal for these properties or if potentially housing would be a more appropriate use. Personally, I just wanted to share that I think that the city should hold off on this zoning change until after the consultant has provided their full report as part of the RENA process, considering that we do need to zone for 1,200 approximately additional housing units. And I'm not sure how losing these housing units might affect zoning, across the city. If we lose these, will that mean we have to add more housing across the city? Or if, these sites could potentially be zoned for housing, if that could help with a RENA requirement that's facing the city right now. That's my comment. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Any further? No more? Okay, seeing that there's no more calls, this study session, a petition to initiate a zone change from the light agriculture to light manufacturing, among other development applications, to allow the development of one-story multi-tenant warehouse building for properties located at the northwest corner of Allen Avenue and Cataract. Staff report.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. In October of this year, OC Engineering and Design, on behalf of Allen Industrial Investors, submitted a request for a study session with the City Council and the Planning Commission to consider a zone change from light agriculture to light manufacturing to allow the development of a one-story multi-tenant warehouse building for the 3 lots located at the northwest corner of Allen Avenue and Cataract Avenue. Next slide, please. One more. Okay. The project would require the following applications listed up on the screen. A zone change, as mentioned, from light agriculture to light manufacturing. A lot merger to tie all the 3 lots together. A development plan review board application for review of the site layout and building architecture. A tree removal application for the removal of all the trees and replacement of trees on site, and then a potential environmental review application, which would be determined prior to the application being deemed complete. Based on the policy, the zone change request and the size of the subject site requires a study session with the City Council and the Planning Commission to be held, as it is tonight. If the request to initiate the zone change is authorized, the proposed warehouse development would be reviewed by the Development Plan Review Board, the Planning Commission, and also the City Council. Previously, a request to build a self-storage facility was considered during a joint study session with the City Council and Planning Commission on July 9th and also on August 27th. At the August 27th meeting, the City Council expressed concerns regarding the loss of the 8 housing units and decided not to authorize the zone change at that time. Next slide. Up on the screen is an aerial of the subject site, which is comprised of 3 lots. Back one, please. Thank you. The site is on Allen Avenue and Cataract Avenue. It has 300 feet of frontage along Allen Avenue and 375 feet on Cataract Avenue. There is a 10-foot right-of-way along both sides of the streets. The subject site, as seen, is surrounded on the north, east, and west with industrial buildings, which are all zoned currently industrial and have a land use designation, general plan designation of industrial also. This is one of two, I think, remaining sites that is still zoned light agriculture. To the south is single-family, 16,000 agriculture lots that are zoned residential. Next slide. Most of the homes on the subject site were built in the 1950s and on the property, and all the homes are not identified on the city's historic resource list. As part of the proposal, all the homes would be demolished, and as mentioned, all the trees would be removed. Next slide. The subject site has a general plan designation of industrial, therefore no change is proposed for the general plan. Next slide. As mentioned, the applicant is requesting as initiation for a zone change to change the properties from light agriculture, which they're currently zoned, to light manufacturing. The request would provide consistency between the general plan, land use designation, and the industrial and the zoning designation of light manufacturing. The rezoning would also allow for the site to be developed with compatible industrial uses on the surrounding properties. On the north side of Allen, it has been designed and developed with industrial uses such as industrial parks, warehouses, and manufacturing businesses. Next slide. The applicant is proposing to merge the three lots together to create one lot that would be about 2.5 acres in size and develop an approximately 64,000 square foot multi-tenant industrial warehouse building. Next slide. The proposed project will also provide access from Allen Avenue and Cataract Avenue, and the proposed project overall would need to meet all the development standards of the city's municipal code. Next slide. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission and the City Council grant the authorization to initiate the zone change and allow the applicant to submit all formal entitlement applications required for the proposed warehouse development. That concludes staff's report.
Okay, any questions? John?
I do have a couple questions. In the staff report, pages 6 and 7, you were talking about the various considerations that are part of the policy that you talked about of having a study session and determining whether this, not giving the applicant at least the approval to go ahead so that they're not wasting money prematurely if they, or unnecessarily if the council decided not to. But so in that, a couple things caught my eye, and that was under the housing part. And so there was, you included under number 5 regarding economic viability, but you included all the housing considerations. And it says in the third paragraph, I just have two questions because it was very educational. And you talk about protected units. And so can you talk a little bit about what protected units are? And they're in that third paragraph.
Sure.
About the housing stuff.
Sure. So under SB Bill 330, which is the Housing Crisis Act of 2019, it does define what these would consist of. So one would be, so there's 3 categories out of the 3. One is potentially subject to this potential development. So one would be, the one that would apply would be occupied by low or very low income households. So that would be something that we would have to verify based on rental income and what they pay for rent, and also what kind of income they receive, and then how many people actually live on the site for each of the individual homes. If it turns out they are considered to be low or very low income, then at that time they would be allowed to stay on the site up to 6 months before the actual construction of the development. And they would also, the developer would have to also pay for relocation fees for the individual tenants of those spaces.
And you mentioned that the property owner has to provide the income verification you're talking about.
Yeah, would submit that to the city for.
Okay. Would that be done before the Planning Commission, DPRB, and everybody else starts hearing the actual merits of the proposal for the actual zone change?
It would be a condition that we would put. So it's not that they can't develop these lots. It's just that if you do develop it, these are also conditions that you need to impose on the developer.
Okay.
So it doesn't restrict it from being developed.
Okay. I'll make a comment about that later, as opposed to a question. So the other part of the in that same section, you were pointing out that the 3 parcels were not listed on our city's housing element that was developed back in 2014, 2017, that time range. And I was just curious, when that was the housing element we developed, and we identified a bunch of sites where we could maybe somehow units might be built at some point. You might recall that the best example of that was the school district property, where we were saying, well, maybe the school district would sell and maybe they would build high-density housing and maybe it'd be affordable. So that's not on our list anymore, I don't think, because that probably couldn't happen. But one other thing that's changed is the number of units that's required. So, in that element, we identified a certain number of parcels, and I was wondering, what was the number of units we had to meet, places in the city where we could build a certain number of houses? Do you remember what that number was?
The previous arena number?
Yeah.
I think it was in the 400 range. Somewhere in the 400, under 500.
Okay, so that was 400, and now we're doing a new housing element that, when are we expected to try to adopt that?
By October of this coming year.
Okay, so about a year from now, a little bit less. And what's the number that we're going to have to hit for that?
It's 1245.
1245, okay, thanks. And that is all the questions I have.
I have one question. There's 2.58 acres.
Yes.
So if you were going to build a load of income housing, how many units could you get on that?
It all depends on what the density level is going to be allowable. The max density level right now for in the city of San Dimas is 16 units. We do have an overlay zone for 30 units to the acre, but those are only the ones that were designated in the previous housing element. So unless we allow for a higher density, 16 would be the max.
Per acre?
Per acre, correct.
32, that's about 40 units approximately.
Correct.
So we could build 40 units of low to moderate income housing on there. That would be the beginning of what we have to build to get to our numbers, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. If I recall correctly, and whenever we had the previous discussion, when we talked about housing, there was concern regarding the traffic count on Gladstone to be able to accommodate such an influx in persons. And again, I hope as a broad statement to council that we don't vote on a project tonight, we vote on the zone change and what's in front of us. I don't want to get down that rabbit's hole again, because I think that was unfortunate what happened last time. But to that end, in terms of use in zone change, am I understanding you correctly that if the zone change in front of us would make this consistent with the existing zoning in the area, correct? So this would fold into M1 consistent with the rest of the northern block of Allen, correct?
Correct. And in addition to that, it would make it consistent with the general plan, which is what the general plan strives, is that make sure that your zoning and your general plan land use are consistent with each other.
So generally, we want to be generally in line with the general plan.
Yes.
Do we know what the traffic count is on Allen or has been?
I do not have that information.
Okay. It's just a curious point, just because I know that was some of the discussion last time in terms of potential other use is to look at uses that would minimize the traffic count or be less impactful perhaps on Allen, as we currently do experience quite a bit of traffic there. And frankly, I'd be curious to see what happens with the traffic flow once we get all of the other traffic modifications occurring right now due to the Gold Line construction, and whether or not people change their routes, based off of that. But thank you.
I just noticed another question I had written down, so I apologize for saying that I was done. I have one more, though. In the same area, I guess there's a no net loss rule, so that projects are not supposed to result in a net loss of the affordable housing or housing in general. I'm not sure what that applies to. It's right before paragraph or number 6.
Yeah.
But there's a statement there that I'm curious about. It says the remaining housing element sites are sufficient to meet the jurisdiction's housing needs. Are you talking about like the old housing element, or are you talking about the one coming up?
We're talking about the one coming up. The note net loss, we wanted to make sure we still addressed it in the staff report so that somebody would know that we did address that and we were aware of that and not aware of the situation of that bill. The thing with this particular site is that it would have had to have been in the last cycle in part of the housing element list. If it wasn't there, then we'd have to address the no net loss of those 8 units.
So since it wasn't in that one, it doesn't have anything to do with this.
Correct.
With the housing element.
It doesn't apply, but we wanted to make sure we
right.
said that we did look
and
at that.
And the reason I bring that up is because one of your statements is the remaining housing element sites are sufficient to meet the jurisdiction's housing needs. And I was wondering if that was referring to the one coming up. How do we know that? There's a survey out there now, and we've talked about it in the past, but the City Council hasn't made any determination on what sites, if there's enough, if there aren't enough, if we need more, or anything like that, or where they are. So that was just a statement I was wondering about.
Yeah, so just to clarify, this no net loss is a different legislation, and it would be changing or reducing the density. So if this was, let's just say, single-family residential, and this was 2.5 acres, and it yielded, let's just say, 10 units. If we were to change that to a non-residential zoning, we would have to transfer those 10 units somewhere else in the city. So it doesn't have to pertain necessarily to the housing element, but generally in cities now, with the legislation, you can't downzone or you can't eliminate a housing site without transferring those units and upzoning a different site
I understand,
simultaneously.
Yep.
To
All right.
have that no net loss.
All right. Thanks for that explanation.
Sure.
If we were to consider, I don't think we are, but if we were to consider to make this residential, it would be silly to change it to industrial right now and then change it back to residential, right?
Somebody would be able to, like this applicant would be able to submit an application, and we wouldn't be able to stop it unless we did a moratorium to stop the project. Because they would be within their right to submit an application.
Another application.
Correct.
Any-
John, I
any-
just wanted to get back to your question real quick. You had asked about if the staff would request the information about the occupants being low or very low. That can always be done up front also. I said that it could be conditioned, but it could be done as part of the initial part, just so we understand if they are or they're not, and that way we can put it in the condition or not put it in the conditions. But
Well, yeah, then that's a good point, because with the housing element coming up, and we've got to provide, and I forget the exact number, 1,265 units. With the housing element coming up, and you observe and are very careful about where we have affordable units that may not have been captured before, if these ones were included in that, now you only need to find 1,257 instead of, so you're down 8. And I'm being a little facetious there with the number because it's such a huge number, but still, it's a little bit that would go toward the requirements for our new housing element. It's just.
But I think in that case, if you were going to try to keep these 8, you'd probably want to just rezone it to housing and do multifamily and upzone it in higher density, so you can capture more of those numbers.
Can I ask a question, John Davis? Or is it?
Yeah, John, go ahead.
Thank you. Are the houses conforming to the existing zoning? Is it in conformance now?
So the AL zone allows for 1 house per lot. So you could say 3 of the homes are legal conforming, and the other 5 are legal non-conforming, because it only allows for 1 house per lot.
Okay, so it's non-conforming at the moment. Across the street, is only low and very low density, right? There's no.
Yeah, because
what would be the closest high density residential?
Yeah, those lots are single family agriculture, so minimum lot size is 16,000 per lot.
Okay.
So just
and the warehouse that we looked at would not fit into the M1, or would it have been an M1 as well? Or was it a different zone required for the warehouse?
I'm sorry, John, I didn't understand.
The previous project that I think the Planning Commission recommended to the City Council was for a warehouse. The zoning for the warehouse would be an M1 as well, or would it be a different zone than what's being proposed now?
It would be M1 also.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
I also wanted just to clarify on Councilmember Ebener's question. The only way we could count these 8 units within our housing element is if we had some type of covenant, or just because homes are occupied by lower income individuals doesn't mean that we can count them towards our affordable housing. We have to have some type of mechanism that locks it in, such as with the Grove Station, we had covenants and deed restrictions on those.
Yep. That's exactly right. And we can talk about, that's part of the broader discussion about housing, but the city may want to consider some mechanisms to ensure that we don't lose affordable housing. And that's another discussion for another time.
Thank you. Any additional questions of the council? Planning Commission, any additional questions, or some time for questions? We've heard from John, but there's 5 of you paying attention here, so you got anything? Dave? David?
Yep, I just needed to unmute. I have no questions of staff, but I obviously have an opinion on the zone change. Whenever that's appropriate, let me know.
Okay. Anybody else? Commissioner Molina?
No, I was just going to say I had no questions or additional comments.
Commissioner Ross?
I'm the same as Dave. I've got a comment, but I'll wait.
Commissioner Green?
I am concerned about the additional traffic on Allen. It's very busy as it is, but we'll get into that later. So no other questions or comments at this point. Thank you.
All right. Any additional from the staff?
I'm sorry.
Any additional from the staff?
No.
Okay. All right. Bring it back to council.
Jeff is always reminding us.
On this study session, we're supposed to take calls for this particular part?
Sure, that would be advisable.
Okay.
For a study session.
All right. If there's anyone in the public who would like to give us a call now, the phone number's on the screen, and then we'll take your calls and hear you. And let me just confirm with the city attorney, is this something that the staff can go ahead and respond back to for these calls?
Yes, because it's a study session, not a public hearing, there's not really any rules, so it's just a conversation.
Good. All right, please give us a call. John, anything? We'll give it about another 30 seconds or so. Okay, seeing no calls, I'll bring it back to the council for and the planning commissioner for comments, and I think this would probably be the time for Commissioner Bratt to voice his concerns about the zoning, and any other commissioner or council who would like to speak up on it. But the one thing I'd like to say, though, is that this is an opportunity, and the Planning Commission needs to speak up and tell us what they want and what their thoughts are, because this is supposed to be a two-way dialogue between us and you guys. And so I appreciate all your input before we bring it back here. Okay.
May I start the comments then?
Yes, you can, please.
John, you want to go first?
No, go ahead, Dave.
Oh, okay. I appreciate the concern that the council has showed for housing and the housing element that's coming up. First of all, I'm not sure these 8 houses are going to make and break our meeting that limit. And I think and Dennis brought this up, I think in all reality, if we tried to do a multifamily with 40 units, I don't believe Allen Avenue can handle it. There's certainly no way to make Allen Avenue wider. So I firmly believe that multifamily housing isn't appropriate, isn't going to work. The other thing is that a couple of things. The general plan calls for the north side of Allen Avenue to be industrial. And I'm going to say 90% of the north side of Allen is exactly that. And not judging on whether this project fits, but I believe the time has come for us to comply with the current general plan and make that zoned industrial. So that's my comments.
So I'll jump in and just say I think Dave's right. I think that this particular site would be an absolutely terrible spot to put any kind of high density housing. Doesn't fit next to the neighbors on the south side, which are in low density, and it doesn't fit in the manufacturing or industrial space either. So my opinion is we ought to move this forward so that we can go through the process.
Commissioner Molina?
I agree with my fellow commissioners too, in that on our previous consideration at this lot, we were looking at a building that was almost 3 stories high, and the one that's being proposed or being looked at right now is kind of what I had in mind for that whole area when I originally drove by that road, Allen Road. So I would definitely be in favor of a zone change to industrial zone manufacturing and be in compliance with the rest of that north side.
All right. Commissioner Ross?
I think it's consistent, and I think it's, given the proximity to the freeway versus where we were looking at warehousing down in the Old Town area, I think it makes more sense, and I think it is consistent with move forward with it.
Commissioner Green?
Yeah, my concern is with the people to the south of there, all the homes. And I think it would be doing them injustice to add say 40 units with maybe 2 cars each coming and going all times of day and night, that traffic would really be a lot. I use Allen a lot back and forth to my home, and I find the traffic really bad right now. I know with Gladstone closed, it has added to it. But if we added 80 new cars to it, I really think that'd be a problem. I also like the idea of being more consistent with the Pacific Plan to have that all industrial on that north side. So my vote would be to change it to light manufacturing.
All right, thank you for your comments.
That's it.
Any other comments? You know, I just wanted to mention back several months ago when this issue came up with the public storage, there was a lot of discussion about retaining the 8 homes because of the RENA issues, and the council, you know, eventually adopted that we were going to move forward with a different plan. But there was a lot of discussion amongst the council concerning the traffic on Allen Avenue. And as was said earlier, there is no way that we can expand that road, and it's already overtaxed already. So, and I received several calls concerning that because they said they can't take any more traffic. We have a continuation school to the east of there. We do have light manufacturing to all surrounding that area, and we have a couple of storage places, and absolutely right that to the south of there are single-family light agriculture, 1600. So I would like to have seen something. I was very much in support of the larger facility because there was only going to be possibly 2 employees there, less traffic. There'd be traffic at certain times, but it wasn't going to supply a ton of traffic onto Allen Avenue. But as everyone knows here, we never got to the zoning issue. We actually discussed it, the project, and not the zoning change. We never got to the zoning change, and that was pointed out to me by all 5 of our current planning commissioners. That's the way we failed because we never got to what we were actually agendized to do, and that was talk about the zoning issue. So, if there's any other comments. I am very much aware that we have this requirement by the state for the RENA numbers, but I'm also personally don't believe that 8 units, when we could better that facility, because I'll tell you right now, I do not believe that I could ever wrap my arms around a development that put in 40 units or 50 units or 30, because it's going to put more traffic in that particular area. I don't imagine that, and I can't imagine that the residents on the south side won't rise up en masse to say, what are you guys doing too? It's just, it's pretty bad that we're in this position, because we actually had a project that would have eliminated some of this issue, and we could have continued to move on. I don't think that, once again, I just do not believe that we can put a housing development there with additional driving or different cars and people. You know, developments bring children, and you know, that street is a busy street. Even though it's a small street, it is a widely traveled street. So, and I'll bring it all back to the council, and people can say what they were thinking about it. But I want everyone to know that I am keenly aware that we have housing element, RENA numbers, and we put together our planning department has put together a community initiated housing element group to discuss this. Not only this spot, but other places. I think we have the planning staff, as well as 4 or 5, maybe 6 members of the public that are discussing it. So I think there's going to be a time that there's going to be a report, and it's going to show us where we can actually put these units. And as it was pointed out just recently in a podcast, and that was that this is really simply, we've got to identify the places that we could put multi-generational housing. And so that's where I stand. I think that I don't think this place is the proper place for any additional houses, and I'm not sure that 8 homes will make a big difference. Okay.
So, I just wanted to sound a note of caution about the whole thing. You're absolutely right that the underlying general plan designation is for industrial. So the idea when we made it that designation back in 1990 or whenever that was that eventually it would go to all industrial, which gradually it has. So on that side of the coin, that's absolutely what was intended and foreseen, and that's what the general idea should be. So just an aside about large developments, because it's not really my main point here about the housing. If you're going to find spots for 1,200 units, I will tell you that wherever you put them, they're going to affect some other residential properties. I'm pretty sure, unless we're going to all put them in industrial areas or something like that. And by the way, the city can initiate a general plan amendment and zone change itself. It doesn't have to be a developer or proponent coming in. But that's sort of a question coming up ahead, and in a way, maybe that's what I'm talking about, maybe being premature, because we should know more about that before we start allowing parcels wherever they are to be developed and then precluding affordable housing and the 1,200. What I'm talking about, though, more specifically, are the 8 houses. I haven't done a survey. I don't know if they are low income or whatever, but I think they're probably more affordable than some houses in the city. And I remember my comments last time were we shouldn't be demolishing or reducing any affordable housing at all unless we have a plan to replace it with something else. Now, that plan may come with the housing element, and that's probably what it'll be. So if this were closer in time to that, then I think the discussion would be good to have where we're talking about everything at the same time, because they all come together. But it's really those 8 units. So if somebody had an idea, well, these 8 affordable units, we're going to have 8 affordable units at someplace else at the same time as this development, I would be completely in favor of it, because then we wouldn't be losing them. But I'm not talking about state law here. I'm not talking about even the housing element per se. I'm talking about what do we really want to accomplish. And in my opinion, we should not be reducing the stock of units that people can afford to live in. And because I don't think any of us want San Dimas just to be a city for the well-to-do. We want to have affordable housing. Not that we're forced to do it, but I think it's just the right thing to do. So that's my argument on this particular one. So there's good arguments on both sides, but that's the idea about the 8 units and why I'm concerned about them.
Thank you. Well, the one question that I would have is that this project wouldn't be before us to talk about the zone change if the owners of those 3 properties had not determined that they wish to do something with their properties. Okay, my question would be to that end is how many properties there that are rentable, or are they all owner occupied? I don't know. But the reality is this wouldn't be before us if in fact the owners didn't want to sell their properties. So somebody, we have to take a little bit of that to if I wanted to sell my home and the city came in and told me you can't sell it, that would kind of put me in a bad spot. Is how much do I want to fight them? This the second time that these projects have come up, and both times, the way I understood it, is the owners were willing to sell those properties. Okay, and we have the same issues with SP 23. You know, those lots are there. Right now, the way I understand it, we don't have anyone that's interested in selling any of those lots on SP 23. So there's that time gap, but a lot of folks want us to figure out what to do, and those are properties that we're going to have to look at too. But in this particular case, the owners of those properties, all three properties, want to sell, unless somebody has something that I haven't read.
Well, I have a question to ask about that.
Sure.
If they wanted to sell their property to another homeowner that would keep it as a house, would they legally be able to do so?
Yes.
Yes, so they can sell their property. It's just the use. If you wanted to sell your property and you wanted to put industrial where you live, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think it would work.
You wouldn't do it. But you could sell to another residential property.
Yeah. And this.
How many property owners are there?
There's, I'm not sure if it's a corporation, but the same owners own all three properties. And they bought,
Thank you.
And they did buy the property to try to sell it as industrial. They took that chance to try to get the zone change, and they've been trying to do that for the last couple of years.
This is the same owners who went through the last exercise with the public storage?
Correct.
Yeah. I'll be brief. I agree with all of the planning commissioners, every single comment. I think that SP 23 and other sites have been identified to assist the city in dealing with its RENA issue. And well, I agree with some of the comments and concerns expressed by members of the public as well as Councilman Ebner. I think that it is not wise to do paralysis by analysis at this point. We've examined this property before. I agree with Commissioner Molina that this looks a little bit more like what I think one might envision in there. It's consistent, at least in the drawings, with what other industrial sites exist on the east and west side of this particular area. And so, and to the parking issue and concern, I agree with the mayor that public storage would have been a much lesser impact, perhaps, as it relates to traffic. However, there is private capital involved in all of this, and there is buyers and there's sellers. And in this instance, this owner has been patient. Here we are again with this. It's consistent with the general plan, so I support staff's recommendation in its entirety.
Do we have any idea how long the current owner that owns the properties, how long they've owned those?
I think they've owned it for the last 3 to 4 years.
Okay.
I don't have any more in the on the making an argument side, but I did want to make sure that when it moves forward, a couple issues that are thought about anyway are the housing, of course. We may be closer to the housing element at that point. We may know more about other sites, but also one that I'm sure you'll look at it, but the coverage of buildings and hardscape on the property and the permeability, because there are ways to either capture the water on site or have roof gardens or whatever they want to do, but we don't want a whole bunch of water that currently is percolating in the soil to somehow run off into the street. And I think there's actually laws and requirements about that, but I just want to make sure that's specifically called out. Thanks.
That will be a requirement of the project.
Super. All right. I think there's been lots of good conversation about it. Do I have a motion or?
I'll move approval of staff's recommendation that the Planning Commission and City Council grant the authorization to initiate zone change and allow the applicant to submit all formal entitlement applications required for the proposed warehouse development.
Second.
All in favor? And I think we have to have a voice vote.
Councilmember Bertone?
No.
Councilmember Ebner?
No.
Councilmember Viana?
Yes.
Councilmember Weber?
Aye.
Mayor Bedar?
Yes.
If I could just say something, if we didn't have a housing problem, I would have voted for this. But I'm reluctant to give up any moderate, low housing at all whatsoever. We're going in the wrong direction, I feel. But if it wasn't for that problem, I would have voted for this.
My sentiments exactly.
I believe that was the way it was back when we were talking about the public storage issue, the same sentiments, but I just see we have bigger and better opportunities than to impact Allen Avenue the way we would be impacting it. That's why I voted yes on the project, but I also voted yes on the last project for that same very reason, as I believe that it was not the right direction. I understand the 8 houses. I also understand the fact that the owners, wanted to move forward with something else. I respect the vote from several months ago. I respect the vote tonight. And would you, Madam City Clerk, would you?
I need to take the vote from the commissioners.
Oh.
Commissioner Brad?
I thought we didn't vote, just as last time we didn't vote, so are we voting this time?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Bratt?
I vote aye.
Commissioner Davis?
Yes.
Commissioner Green?
Yes.
Commissioner Molina?
Yes.
And Commissioner Ross?
Yes.
The vote passes by a 5-8-2 count, with Councilmember Bertone and Ebner opposed.
And Mayor, if I can just say, I hear the housing discussion, but the truth of the matter is that the Taylor House has been identified as affordable, so now we're down to 7 instead of 8, and we're in process going through Pioneer Square, which potentially may have some affordability in it. So it's not that the city's not working to try and put housing in places. I think we're well on our way to doing that. And SB 23 provides ample opportunity to take a big chunk out of some of that zoning anyways. So we are working on it, I think, and I think we're going to get there. This just isn't the right place.
And that's a good point that Ryan makes, that we are making progress in other areas. The city and the council staff over the years have had a proclivity for looking at projects and proposals very narrowly and not looking at how they fit in with a broader picture. And that's why we need the housing element. When we see the housing element, and even if you got 200 units, 300 units on SP 23, and I don't know how many possibly get there at all. I'm just making that up. Don't anybody get alarmed in the neighborhood. But, that leaves us 1,000 more to go. So where are they going is the issue here. And that's why we need the whole element to just say, we're putting a 10-story building, right where you are, Ryan. And then that'll take care of it.
I'm already in high density, so I'm not afraid of it.
Just kidding.
Well, and there's nothing to be said that the parcels in SB 23 will be identified as those units. So
exactly. It's the big process.
We honestly don't know where they're going to go. We'll wait for that housing element committee to get together with the planning. Planning will eventually initiate a report, and then we'll have a public hearing, I'm quite sure, to discuss it, because unfortunately, it takes time, And it is taking time on this housing element, but it took time, 8 years ago for the housing element. We thought it would never end. And at the end of the day, we got through it. And as I heard recently, we just need to identify these areas that we could make zone changes at. And it doesn't mean that we may ever build a unit. This is the third housing element that I know of, and that we haven't built a unit yet based on the housing elements. And like John said earlier, we used to identify the school district property, but we used the death out of that, and so now we can't use that property no more. So it's going to be interesting. We're going to have to look at something, because we got the gold line coming. And as Ryan said, PSQ is coming along, and they're offering some housing element in that. So that's it. City Clerk, I know that you took the vote and you said 8 to 2, but I think it should be separated out. Planning Commission, City Council. So could you just clarify that, please?
Okay. So the vote for the City Council was a 3 to 2 vote, with Councilmember Bertone and Ebner opposed. The Planning Commission vote was a 5-0 unanimous vote.
In favor of.
In favor of.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Any additional business to talk about before we go to? We take a 5-minute break, 10-minute break to City Council. Okay. Somebody like to say adjournment? John saying adjournment.
We're adjourned for 5 minutes.
Thanks.